Hey friends, John Quirk here. Welcome back to another episode of the Not So Woo Woo Guru. I'm super excited. I've been doing solo episodes for the past couple weeks. Maybe you guys are sick of hearing me just talking to the microphone and muse about my life. So have a really cool guest on today, Brent McCann. Brent's a guy I actually connected with a few months back. He's in a very similar position as me. He's transitioning out of a corporate job, moving into doing retreats. We have Joe Dispenza in common, a lot of cool similar threads. But yeah, man, I'm super excited to talk to you. I just love to know a little bit about kind of your story and what has you in this sort of, transitionary period of wanting to move out of the familiar known, as Dr. Joe would say, into the great unknown, the abyss of retreat worlds. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, man. Well, thank you, John. I appreciate the introduction. Yeah, man, I think what you just said really summarizes it all. I had this path where 10 years ago I was in a ton of debt and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I was with my ex-wife at the time, and she was like, "Go back and get your degree." And so I went and I got my degree, and I thought, great, with this degree, I'm going to go into HR and I'll work this corporate HR job. I'll stop traveling so much as I was before, and I'll be home. We could start a family. And it really was wonderful, and it served me wonderfully. And it was a lot of unknown. I wasn't quite on that journey yet of understanding it, but I got to a point where I started to really notice the redundancies. I had achieved, when we start something new, achievements feel so important. It feels like it's that validation that I'm on the right track and I'm doing the right things. And what I found was that I had done all of those things. I had gotten these certifications. I started doing, getting promotions. I started to oversee large teams. I was looking over multi-site throughout the US. And, I had achieved that. And in the end of the day, I still felt like there was more. And not the more of like, oh, let's get the next job. Because a year ago, I had the opportunity to get the next job. I was in it, and I was working it in the interim as an HR director. And, it was such a great trial run. It allowed me to see, okay, this is what you're going to do. You're going to get paid a ton more than you're getting paid right now. And at that time, I thought, money is the answer. It's the key. And, what I found was that, after doing it for 2 or 3 months, I realized I don't want to do this. I realized that I don't feel fulfilled because all I'm doing is playing political games. And, there's the higher in the ranks, for the lack of a better term, that we get, the more politics are involved. And this was my first real exposure to it. And I can play the game, but that was me being inauthentic to myself. And that was such a gift. I mean, in that period, you want to talk about like imposter syndrome, fear, not knowing, and then the excitement of, I go back to the money. Money was such an important thing to me because it showed security. It gave hope. It, allowed our family to be able to do the things that we want to do. And when I realized that when I was sitting in that space of like, the money isn't what's important. What's important is aligning my values. And I was working with a coach at that point, and we did a dive into my values. And I realized that authenticity was like my top 5, one of my top, well, actually it was like my top 3. And so now I could take, it's hard to read the label when we're inside that jar. Now I could get outside of the jar and see, like I thought that I was being in alignment by chasing these things. But really, my alignment is totally different. I want to give. I want to live in gratitude. I want to live in wholeness, not this space where, I'm still able to serve people, but it's limited. It's in this corporate bubble, and everybody, uses the same terms and uses the same phrases, and it kind of just gets redundant. So, I had a real my journey started several years ago. And then over the last 2-3 years, I attended an event out in Austin, Texas. And it was literally just about like finding fulfillment. What's the framework to find this? It was a 2-day event. And I remember, we were all out to dinner. There was like 100 people there, but, a couple of us went out to dinner afterwards. And these people are talking about Dr. Joe. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Like, what's this all about? And they're like, oh, go read this book. You'll understand it. And as I was reading through it, I was really taken back because, I was raised in a very like non-denominational Christian, like, very woo-woo, but like way crazier than anything that I could ever describe. And so I was very adverse to that. I was like, I don't want to be exposed into that space because I didn't really enjoy it all that much. And here's, Dr. Joe, who's got the science-based, but still a little woo-woo, but, it's science-backed. And I really was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. So I, got really into that. I made commitments into my meditations. I was in a different group that I had joined, like a 6-month group that focused on different areas in growth and development in our lives. And what I found in this was it was like I was knocking on this door that opened up, and there was this all new, endless potential of opportunity. And, there was this level of excitement, but I still didn't know. Like in Austin, I remember sitting in one of the sessions and being like, I want to do this one day. I want to lead with people. I want to guide them. I want to help them to find ways to be fulfilled. And it was one of those things where it's like, you get a preview. It's like before the movie actually starts, you just get a little preview of it,
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I remember talking to my friend I was with. I was like, oh shit, I really want to do this, man. And I go, but I have no idea how this would ever happen, So I was like, all right, well, the first step, let's join this group and we can work through this for, 6 months, become more self-aware. And, throughout it, I'm meditating more. I got exposed to breath work. I started doing some breath work. And, I signed up for a Dr. Joe retreat last July. And so I was out in Denver. I went by myself, and that changed my life. Like I thought, like Austin changed my life. Like this event totally rocked my paradigm of what I thought was known, and even the idea of understanding the unknown, even though that's an oxymoron. It just sat there and was in total, like my nervous system, everything was just, whoa, what is going on? But I was excited and I was drawn to it, and I thought, man, what do I need to get more of that? And the key for me is always about alignment. And so what I noticed coming out of that retreat was there were some areas that I was really living out of alignment. One of them was money. There were relationships that I was in at that point that were out of alignment as well. And what I was focusing on, I was, as much as I was looking to give, I wanted something in return. So, so it's that conditional relationship that I had with the universe, really.
Yeah.
And I'm the kind of person that when I get something, I will go all in. And so I had some inspirations on some things in my life to make some changes, and I did. I figured if I can take this experience from a retreat and the things that I've done over the last couple of years and really put it to the test. Let's see if this works, and let's see what happens in life. And although it's scary and I don't know what's going to happen, I'm still going to step into it and use the practice that I have to continue on it. And so, long story short with that is I left my wife. We split up, and as hard as that was, there was something, energetically that kind of opened up. And and I realized that through that, like, I have nothing but love for her, gratitude for her. This isn't like one of those, like, we were at war with each other type things. But what I realized was that for me, it was important for me to be in a certain space. And so, looking at that, and then all of a sudden I was like, what am I doing at my job? That was like the next thing I wanted to look at, right? Like, what's going on, and realizing that I didn't feel that fulfillment. I didn't feel the excitement. I was trying to, and I was doing a lot of things, trying to, be matter, forcing matter, and it just was not flowing very well. And I did a breath work because, every morning I'd get to the office, and I had my own office. So I'd go in before anybody ever got there. I'd do a meditation or a breath work before. And I remember I did this like breath work where it just sent me places. And I,
as it do.
yeah, right.
As it do.
So then I'm just like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, all right. So I'm like, all right, let me go to the bathroom. And I'm washing my hands in the bathroom. And all of a sudden it's like, bro, you don't have to do this anymore. Right. And I was like, oh shit. Like it was the kind of thing like when it came to me, like goosebumps all up my whole body. And I'm like,
Yeah. I've
I'm
had
like,
2 of those moments hardcore. I've had getting fired from my last corporate job, like a sense of failure and like existential dread a little bit, but way overcome, like almost like that was like this. And then there was this tidal wave that came over it of like, wait, I don't have to go to work tomorrow. Like, this is amazing, So that
yes.
was one. And then another time I was at a real like searching period in my life. And I went down to Costa Rica and kind of through serendipity ended up doing a few ayahuasca ceremonies, and I hated it. Like, it was terrible. And all these other people were having these beautiful experiences and all that. And then I started to like get in this thought loop where I was literally like, I thought the world had no meaning. I like everything that I like love about being alive. I felt the opposite. I felt like the sun was never going to come up. I felt like I was tricked into a cult. I felt like I had been like lied to. I was like all this like really negative stuff. And then I remember having this exact thought of like, you don't ever have to take psychedelics or any like intoxicating substance ever again. You could just do breath work. You could just do like, you could do this all, and you could show people that there's another way, not advocating that there's not a purpose for that stuff. But yeah, it's just really interesting. I've had 2 very distinct moments of like, holy crap, I don't have to do this anymore. And then the feeling, that overwhelming like feeling of like, yes, like just came through like so hardcore. Yeah. That's interesting to have it in the office though, while you're still working. Like,
yeah, it was fun. I was like, because like people kind of knew.
How do you go to meetings after that? Like, Jesus,
right?
Like,
like people kind of knew that I was kind of out there with some of this, like, because I'm an open book, and I'm not going to be the person that's going to, like I said, like to me, top 3 values is to live authentically, and so, whatever that is, that's how I'm going to show up. And I remember being so excited, and I was like, all right, like we're going to do this. We're going to go buy a truck. Like, you're going to trade your truck in. You're going to buy a truck. You're going to get a cap on the back. You're going to go live on all these like crazy places. And I'm like, no, that's probably not going to be it right now. Like, I know you're excited, man, but just chill out for a second. Let's just take it as it comes. And, I just was like, all right, well, I knew I was in the process of I had really manifested this investment property with a friend of mine that he was an old neighbor. He had moved to a retirement home. He had this home and had an amazing deal. I was in the process of flipping this house, and I knew the margins, and I knew it was going to be financially successful. And I thought, okay, well, like my living is totally different than it was before. And now I've got, some things that I need to make sure of, but also a little bit more freedom in some other areas. So I don't need as much as I did before. And I remember thinking, okay, well, what would I want to do? And I'm like, well, I want to coach. Like, that's, I do that in the HR space, right? I'm coaching leaders, I'm coaching employees that have problems, and I'm working through them or through those situations to help them find the answers that they're looking for. But I was like, all right, but I really want to do this. Okay, cool. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to be a coach, there's tools, there's modalities that I want to get better at, right? And so breath work was one of them. And I was like, all right, well, I went down to Austin, Texas. There's this breathwork practitioner thing I did. And I was like, oh, this is really great. Actually, to be honest with you, I hated doing it. I went through it, and to see how people, well, because you go back to like, it reminded me of some of like the old days when I was getting raised in like the non-denominational church, people screaming and expressing, and so it brought up a lot for me, which was beautiful because it allowed me to sit in that space and realize like, it's okay, man, like it's all right. This is part of this journey. And I got home, and I was in a breath work in the evening, and actually, no, it was back in the office in the morning. I did a breath work, and I felt like there was something saying like, you should look at a men's retreat. I thought, okay, like, let me go see, like, maybe there's a retreat that I could attend and what have you. And I looked, and I looked, and I looked, and I really couldn't find anything specific for men. And I thought, wow, man, that sucks. And then there was this light that kind of went off that was like, but yeah, maybe this is an opportunity. and I'm like, okay, and then I get a little bit of the goosebumps again, a little bit of the excitement. And I was like, well, I remember, I have this, I call it the creator. So I have this conversation with the creator, and I'm like, well, where would I go? And they're like, well, Arizona. And I'm like, but what? I don't know anything about Arizona. Like, why? And then it was like, well, no. And then, I let go. I'm just like, whatever, it'll come however it's supposed to show up. And shortly thereafter, Sedona came, and I don't know anybody that's ever been to Sedona. I've never been to Sedona.
I've been to Sedona.
Yeah, right. So, I heard it's a little mystical, but I don't know the details of it. So I'm just like, okay, whatever. And so, like I said earlier, like, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it right. I'm going to go all in on it. So I booked a flight. 2 weeks later, I was on an airplane. I had started already getting in communication with vendors. I was looking at locations. I was looking at the food vendors. I was looking at activities we could do. And, in a 4-day trip, I got everything aligned, and I got everything put together for the men's retreat. And, and then thereafter, I mean, this, now it was just a waiting game. It's like, okay, when do I give my notice at my corporate job? Like, now I see the dream, right? Like I'm like, oh, there it is. And it's close, and I want to move, but there's important things like year-end bonuses that I want to make sure that I, get paid out on.
Yeah.
And so, I gave my notice, and, in middle of April, so about a month from now, is going to be my last day. And, it's crazy to think that really 2 years ago, I was sitting in this group of 100 people that I didn't really know. And I had this dream. I had no idea how it was going to happen. I didn't know when. I didn't know any of the details, except there's this little fire that's in me, and just walking through the process. And now to know, like, in like 3 months, it's a dream that's going to be fulfilled. And it's going to be a dream that opens another door to another, space of endless opportunity. And that, to me, is the excitement. That's the joy.
Yeah. I think it's such an interesting sort of conundrum of, like, stability and the known, right, which can serve certain things in our lives, right? Like, especially if we have routines or things that we can kind of focus on that we know, help to ground us, or, like, money's a thing, like, we need it. You know what I mean? Like, we've got to have a shelter. We've got to have enough to have food. We've got to, if you have a family, you, like, especially as a man, you have to support them, right? Like, that's a thing that you have to do. And then there's the other side of, having, I think, the marrying of, like Dr. Joe says, like, a clear intention with the elevated emotion. And you talked about, like, the goosebumps, or the excitement was a word that you used several times. And, I've really allowed that to be my compass for all the best decisions that I've made. Like, when I moved to California, I had no idea what was waiting for me out here. Like, I didn't know any of the neighborhoods. I didn't have a single contact in any kind of yoga studios or any kind of anything. I thought I was, like, going to try to hustle doing yoga, which I did for a while. And it just pays really poorly out here. And so the universe was kind of like, it gave me some opportunities, but it was like, yeah, you're probably not going to be able to sustain that. And I'd already done a couple international retreats, but I was like, wouldn't it be cool to do more retreats, And then I was like, well, it's San Diego. I'm like, LA's right there. I'm like, Joshua Tree. I'm like, there's probably a bajillion retreats around here, And then, like, just like you with the men's retreat, like, I looked and I was like, oh, there's really not. Or there was either like camping and doing like wild things out in the forest, or there was like luxury, like $1,000 a day thing, right? And I was like, well, none of those are my vision, and none of those are like what I would be looking for. I was like, what about something that's just holistic and accessible and really transformative, but also could be fun and playful and doesn't have to be like super woo-woo or super serious, right? It's like, I've had so many different types of people come to these retreats now, and it's been like an affirmation, that was what was needed, and I think we just have to be curious enough to get there, and then really trusting enough that, yeah, we don't know how it's going to unfold. And I'm like in a river of change right now. You and I talked about it, where I was like, I've been doubting myself lately. I've been doubting the amount of income. I've been doubting the amount I've spent on marketing things that haven't worked, and how much that's frustrated me, and how hurt I've been by it, So I was like looking at corporate jobs and I was looking to go into nursing and all that stuff. And like immediately, like the opposite of goosebumps. It was like internal, just like, no, like don't do it. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. And so, you know, even like, you know, you're talking about coaching, and this is an area I'm like so passionate about wanting to step into. And I like thought about all these things I could teach. You know, I've got a yoga background. I'm an athlete. I've dove into nutrition and neuroscience and the quantum mechanics and all this stuff. And it just felt overwhelming. And then I was like, all right, let me just scale down. Like what feels like the best things that I practice or I do when I'm at my best. And it's like being authentic, right? That's the highest literal frequency you can be on, is literally feeling like you're doing what you're meant to be doing, which is why so many people struggle, right? Which is why, you know, one of the biggest things I see on retreats is people lost that sense of meaning. Like they don't have anything there. So many people don't even have something they're passionate about. I ask people, I'm like, you know, what would you do with a blank check and with a free day to do whatever you want? Some people don't even know, you know, because they've just been so lost down the rabbit hole of, you know, trading their time for money and going on the hamster wheel. And so I said, okay, like I can definitely help people with that. And then I think, you know, intuition is something we're all blessed with, and whether we like it or not, we all have it. It's a tool. We can either sharpen it or we can let it dull. And, you know, things like meditation, things like breath work, right? Like when I'm practicing these things with reverence and I'm really giving it a proper energy and a proper effort, I do start having like all these crazy synchronicities and all these things start to pop up. And then when I go away from it, it's like I can sustain the reverb of it for a little while. Like it'll kind of trickle out for a little while. And then all of a sudden it's like, ooh, nope, it's not, you know. And it's like, but how do we trust? How do we trust like you're doing a retreat, right? This is your first time. And I know we've talked about like you're putting out a bunch of money for it and you've made all these plans. You've been to Sedona a bunch of times. And so like, what is your strategy? Like, what are you leaning into right now? Because you said at one point you were in debt, and now I'm guessing you have a little bit of security with, you know, the job that you've been doing. But, you know, how are you trusting that this is the right path for you? What are you leaning into? What's working?
That's a beautiful question, because, you know, let's share this one thing, and I can't remember who I heard it from, but it's a good story. You know, but, you know, it's like the idea of, well, it's defining the term burning the ship, right? And so where did this term burning the ship come from?
Burn the boats, the Vikings.
Right? Yes, right?
I've been thinking about this so much recently. It's so funny that you brought this up, because I feel like I'm burning the boats right now. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going back to nursing school. I'm going to whittle down my spending as much as I can. I have a roommate I just invited to stay with me for a while so I can cut my costs down. Like I'm literally like all the way down to the bare essentials. So I'm just like burning the fucking boats, man. Let's go.
Yes, right? And so like I heard this, right? I heard this and I'm like, oh yeah, you know, like if they would get there and then they burn it because where they are, they've got to do something with it now. There's no looking back. There's no going back to what you know.
Yeah, for those that are listening who haven't heard this before, it's like the Vikings would essentially sail to a location to pillage and rape and take it over. And the way that the leaders would inspire the soldiers was they would turn around and burn the boat. So they had that was it. They were there. Like they had to do this, you know, like it had to happen. And so, yeah, I just wanted to sprinkle that in case people don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so I thought to myself, well, you know, that sounds good. You know, like that sounds sexy. Let's do this and let's go for it, you know, because everything does. It's just like, you know, when it's new, it's like, oh yeah, let's go do this. Okay. And then, so I'm like, yeah, you know, like what I'm going to do is, you know, I've got a nest egg. I did the math. I'm a data guy. So I did the math. I realized I could be a year and a half without a job and live comfortably, you know, and that kind of thing. And thought, okay. But like, you know, I was reading this book by Grant Cardone, and in it, he was talking about like how he had to relocate. Like he went from living in Louisiana, he moved to California. He knew nobody, kind of like what you were saying, John, like, you don't know anybody. So now it's like, what do you do? Well, you've got to do something. And, you know, in this situation, you know, I wanted to make sure that I put myself where I have to grow. I want to scale my own growth and my own development. And it's not out of lack. It's out of excitement. It's out of service to others. And so if it means that I have to be a little uncomfortable, then let's go ahead and do it. And, you know, it sounds great to say it, but to your, like what you were saying too, about like, you know, there's difficulties. There's this, oh my God, now, you take away the dream and the aspirational piece about it, and you look at it and you're like, there's a lot of work here. There's a lot to consider. There are things that I thought would be so easy that are not easy, and it requires the effort, and it requires, but again, like, this is where, like, to answer your question, is like, I know in my bones, this is where I'm supposed to be. And whenever I've felt this in my life, and I've just trusted, and I've gone through like the whole, well, but maybe it isn't, or maybe it is, or whatever, but I sit and I trust, and I go back to my practice, right? So as a kid, it was a lot of prayer, as an adult now, it's more meditation or journaling or, taking walks. I mean, God, there's so many things that can get unpacked just by taking a walk. And, go into it from that space and realize that I don't need to know the how or the, all of that right now. It's, as Dr. Cho would say, it's none of my business, right? Like, but what can I do to invest my energy to believe in this, to behave as though this is what I should be doing, and then become that person?
Yeah.
And it's this step of like self-actualization. And in the beginning, it's just like when we, if someone were to tell me, Brent, go outside right now, put your vehicle in neutral and push it. The hardest part is that first push. It's 100%. Getting all of the momentum to start moving. And so in this beginning, there's difficulties. There are concerns. There is, what if I fail? What if, when we think about things and we say, well, what if I fail? What that's really saying is, it's bringing the insecurities about our own selves up. It's not saying, oh, what if I give to somebody? What if I help benefit them? What if I support them in their journey? It's saying, well, what about me? What if my own insecurities are exposed? What if I'm not as good as I thought I was? And so this type of work is really a gut check. It's a gut check to say, you are important. Like, that's where it comes out. Like, I did this, I was doing a breath work yesterday. And sometimes in breath work, I always try to think about what's the next clue in the journey? Is the universe going to throw something at me, And instead of doing that, I sat in it and I just said, Brent, I love you. And in the 3 rounds of it, every breath, just saying that over and over again, and not looking for the answer, but just being in the moment to say, if I break this down and I look at me as a soul, am I really that worried? Yeah. Well, no, I'm not. It's this desire to make sure that people think that I'm cool, or that I'm successful, or, all these things, these pressures that I place on myself that detract from that. Yeah. And so it's really important to get back to. And
entrepreneurship is going to amplify that. Just as a FYI, and if you're listening to this and you are an entrepreneur, you're thinking about being an entrepreneur, I think one of the most simultaneously beautiful things about entrepreneurship, but also really hard and scary things about it is, if you were working at your job, right, and somebody had a complaint, or you had to deal with something, and maybe it didn't go well, or they said, oh, Brent's not a good HR manager or something like that, like, you take it personally, but also it'd be in the ecosystem of the company, right? So maybe the corporate culture isn't dialed in, or they don't like their job, or like there's a lot of other mitigating factors. When somebody says no to your coaching or your retreat or your thing or your baby that like you've put all this time and all this effort into, it's a real gut check. I mean, it's like being rejected for dates over and over and over and over again, and for, we get 8,000 to 10,000 people that come to our website every single month. And I'm hoping that maybe 5 of them will register for retreats, each month. It's like, I mean, that's an incredible rejection rate, and I have a friend who's fundraising for a really cool tech startup right now. And she said, for every 100 VCs that she pitches, venture capitalists that she pitches, maybe 1 even just expresses interest. So she's just getting rejected all the time, but it's like, it's such a beautiful reminder that, like you said, if you can just be giving your best effort to whatever is put in front of you. And I just reread the Surrender Experiment with our book club, and it's like, that guy was not trying to build a multi-billion-dollar company, Michael Singer. You know, he was literally just trying to actually do the opposite. He just wanted to meditate, live on minimal amount of money and food, and like just be away from everybody all the time. And then he manifested where he's like, I just saw him on Tony Robbins' podcast the other day in front of like 1 million people. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, I mean, if we can really, I mean, we have to have those clear intentions, right? You have a very clear intent, like this type of retreat, breath work, like you've found these things through your own inner journey. And now it's time to put your best effort into it and surrender the outcome of the how, because it's really, like you said, Dr. Joe's lies, like it's none of your business how it's going to happen. And if you can continue to subscribe to that, if you can wake up each day, right, expecting that greatness is going to be a part of your human experience, but not trying to figure out all the steps of how it's going to happen, I really do think that that's like the sweet spot. I think that's just such a magical, and it's hard to stay there all the time because all these other things that will inevitably pop up. But I'm just curious of like, yeah, like where do you feel like is making the best impact? You said breath work is helpful, meditation's obviously helpful, but you know, what's kind of keeping you, like when you have those moments of doubt throughout your day, like what are the practices or things that you're doing to come back to that state?
Yeah, I'm sorry, John, you broke up there.
Yeah, so I was just saying, like, you know, as we kind of move through our day, you know, we can set our intentions, I think, through breath work and meditation in the morning. And, you know, Tony Robbins calls it like, you know, framing for the day, or, you know, Dr. Joe talks about like intention setting for the day, or you said like walking as the person you want to be. But then as we move through the day, life throws us off, right? And our mind kind of goes a little haywire and we kind of lose that track that we're on. What are some of the things that you find most helpful as you're moving, especially still in a corporate environment, to stay in that right state of mind, that like things are manifesting as they need to?
For sure. For sure. You know, one of the things that I actually do is I schedule it into my day.
Same. So yes, I just started doing that. I love that.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, I wake up.
I have an alarm. I literally put an alarm on my phone.
Yeah.
2:00. And there's like a really good research around like first thing in the morning, 2 to 4, and 7 to 9 at night. Like those are the prime like impression times for your brain. So yeah, sorry, awesome. I got really excited about that.
It's awesome because like I'm big in like, you know, I wake up around 5:15, and I'm like, all right, you know, where my brain waves are at that point, let's go ahead and hit the subconscious, do a meditation. Yeah. And then, you know, so like the time in the afternoon is 2:30. It's on my calendar every day, you know, during the work week. So at 2:30, I've got 15 to 20 minutes with breath work. And I close my office door and I put something over the window and I lock the door, but you know, whatever, it's fine. I do that and that helps to recharge me. And originally I did that because I don't drink caffeine. I don't do anything like that. And at 2:00 in the afternoon is when I started getting tired. So I thought, oh, I can just do some breath work to go ahead and just re-energize. But now it's more than that, right? So now it's more than just getting energy. It's filling my cup back up to stay, you know, remain on the course. You know, the other thing I like to do is during the lunch hour, as I always get up and I move. So I go for a walk. You know, I live in the Northeast, so you know, in the wintertime it might be a little bit different how I do that. But going for walks, getting movement, you know, and you know, even before that, when I take my walk, yes, there's advantages to taking a walk in just silence and just kind of being. But you know, where I work and where I live, there's a lot of road noise. So I put earbuds in and I'm putting on things that energetically will help me to recharge, right?
Yeah.
Like I love the band, the Deftones. They're awesome. I'm a big fan, but I'm not going to listen to them in the middle of my day because if I'm irritated about the meeting that I just came out of, it's only going to make me more irritated.
I have this with punk rock. I have to like be it sounds crazy, but I have to be selective. Like before hockey is a great punk rock time, but like, yeah, winding down at the end of the day, listening to like emotional lyrics or like really fast 3 power chord, like it's not the thing. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I look at from a neuroscience standpoint, like what are the times of day? What are the things that I could do to support myself through it? You know, so whether it's on the, you know, 15, 20 minute, 30 minute drive to work, whatever it is, what am I listening to during that time? What am I putting in my cup? You know, and honestly, the days where it's the hardest and I actually don't want to do any of the meditation, I don't want to do the breath work, I do it anyways.
Heck,
you know, and it's hard. Like I had this a week or two ago where like I felt really down. I felt discouraged. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Why am I doing this? You know, all this stuff. And I was doing a breath work in front of my fireplace. And, you know, and this was after like 15 minutes of like, do I want to scroll or do I want to do breath work? You know?
Yeah.
So, you know, but what I did is what I found is by doing that breath work, I was able to just clear myself.
Yeah.
And come back to, you know, I always go back to like the soul, like, who am I? Like, who is, like, if you take away all this stuff that we see in this reality, what's actually there? Right. And, you know, that's really supported me. And, you know, it's capturing it in the moment, because there are times where, and I've learned this over the last month or two, where all of a sudden I'll start thinking something, but then when I replay it, I actually, like, quietly, this little voice of doubt started talking to me like 3 days before, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, you know, so it's about setting those intentions and saying, okay, what is it that I want to become so aware of that it won't go by my thoughts anymore,
Yeah.
you know? And recognizing that I think this is a really big piece, is recognizing that we're going to make mistakes. We're still going to feel down at times, but it's a matter of like just giving each other grace and holding space for us, holding space for ourselves at times when we really don't know where to go and we don't know what to do, and just being able to hold space and say, you know what, that's okay. That's okay. You know what, today was hard. That's okay. What's one thing you did really well though? You know, it's like, all right. So, you know, and even though in the short term, it doesn't always feel great, when we look at the long term, this is the compound effect. You start to see that these actions start to really help to push that car to get it moving, to build momentum.
I love that. Yeah, I think for me, like it really starts and ends with mindset. You know, I mean, I when I become a shepherd of my thoughts, and I really am cognizant of, as I move through the day, you know, are those voices going to pop up? Yes. Are those interactions with people that are less than savory or less than my favorite going to happen? 100%. But it's like, you know, that's why like the discipline of meditation or having some kind of inward practice, to me, is the non-negotiable. And like you said, I mean, there's so many paths up that mountain. I think breath work is an amazing tool. Meditation is obviously an amazing tool, but just going for an undistracted walk is also an amazing tool. Some people have this when they paint or when they surf or when they work out, right? Like there are pockets where you don't have that little chiming, doubting voice, or you do, but you find like people who are athletes and who work out, right? I think about the amount of hours it takes. I was listening to something the other day that, like, you know, for Steph Curry to shoot like 10,000 3-pointers in his career, or whatever he shot, it's like 10 or 15,000. He's probably shot over 100 million practice shots. You know what I mean? It's like the amount of discipline and time that it takes for an athlete to really condition themselves, that, you know, and it's like Hall of Fame numbers in baseball, right? If you fail 65% of the time, you're in the Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? It's like, but it's like that's their arena, right, to manage that voice, right? Because if Steph Curry chucked up a couple shots and missed them early in his life and then just stopped playing basketball, I mean, look at all the amazingness that he would have left on the table, you know? And so, but if you don't have a way to really anchor it, and if you don't really have a way to come back to some kind of reference point, I call it like a GPS coordinates. You know, I think of this as like if you're in a sailboat, right, and you have a GPS coordinates, but the wind doesn't always cooperate, right? Like you've got to kind of go against the wind sometimes, and then other times it's right at your back and it's nice and easy and the sun's out and the waves are, you know, but it's like you still have to have that coordinate, you know. And so like you have very clear intentions, like I'm leaving this job, I'm starting a new way of being, it feels really good, which is my ultimate litmus test. I think if we are sensitive to when we're excited about things, right, there's something to that. Like when I lost my job, it was like, I love hockey, I love yoga, I'm going to do those two things as much as possible. Yoga, I think I can make some money doing, so I'm going to depend on that as like but like that was it, you know. And then when I got out of teacher training, it was like I was the first teaching classes, I was the first doing privates, I was so hungry just to make it kind of happen that I wasn't really thinking the way I do now in terms of like big picture money or big kind of stuff. I just was so enjoying the process of it, and I think it's such a beautiful testament to like we can still have one foot, like you still are in your exit strategy, right? And you're not giving up like that part of your life, and you've set like a really clear, like I have this year and a half of like stability. I'm not advocating for my approach of like having nobody at certain times, because I've really put myself under tremendous stress with that, and it's been a teacher for me, but I don't advocate anybody do it. But I think if we're all really honest with ourselves, like, how much is enough financially, or how much is enough of trading time for money before we actually say, holy crap, like I'm subscribing to this life and I'm living this life that I don't even really enjoy. And yes, there's going to be pains, there's going to be challenges, but wouldn't you rather have, all those missed shots before the success of making it in the NBA finals? Like, wouldn't you, if you knew that was going to be the outcome, wouldn't you start failing right now? Wouldn't you start making mistakes, right now? I heard one really good thing I wanted to share, and then I'll let you get out of here in a minute. But I was listening to Wayne Dyer, and he was talking about how most people, it's almost like they live in their house, and their house, the electric goes off and there's no lights, and they drop their keys. Right. And so they start looking for the keys, and they say, so I'm never going to find my keys. But then they look outside and there's a street light on outside. So they go outside their house and they start looking for their keys under the street light. And then the neighbor comes and is like, what do you do? It's like, looking for my keys. And it's like, well, okay, like I'll help you. And it's like, but where are they? Like, where'd you lose me? He's like, oh, in my house, And it's like, if we think about it that way, right, the fallacy of trying to solve the equation of life, right, which is health and happiness and all these things, we really have to spend more time looking within, like we really do. I mean, I think in a world that's so distracted, I mean, I have to literally like put my cell phone in a different room for most of the day, because I just don't have the willpower like to not look at it. But in a world that is increasingly segregated and distracted and moving away from that practice of looking within, I don't know. I found so many of those answers there, and I'm sure you have as well. And I guess in closing, I just would like to say, like, what are some of those key answers? What are those key things, those yeses that you've kind of found that maybe people can take away or be inspired from this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So are you looking for like the key? Can you rephrase that? I just want to make sure I'm tracking. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, I think you mentioned like the goosebump moment, right, in Austin, of like, okay, this is something that I really love and I think that I can do. But, what are some of the like the major yeses, or some of the major things that you feel like, have kind of bubbled up or given you those goosebumps that you feel like somebody else could learn from, or somebody else could listen to that and say, oh man, like, that's what I do, or that's the moment that I know that I'm on the right track?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we look at it, I'll even use like the application of like how I use breath work, right? And it's not always the energetic breath work. A lot of the times it's more of the yin type of breath work. I was terrified of flying, to the point where like if I got on an airplane, I would be taking chill pills, and would like knock me out for the whole day. And that's really hard when I'm trying to go on vacation, or I'm traveling for work and things like that. And it was this opportunity. I remember I had like a 40-minute flight into Washington, and I was like, you know what, I'm not going to do it. And it's just like, okay, let me use the tools. What tools? Not going to take the medicine, I should say. So it's like, okay, let me use the tools. What tools do I have, right? So before the flight, I sat, and I just put on my soundproof earbuds and just did a 10-15-minute visualization meditation, right? See myself getting on the plane, see myself sitting, see myself being relaxed, see myself getting off the plane. How would I feel getting off the plane? How grateful would I feel? All of those things. And then, okay, what can I do to calm myself physically, right? So, okay, I could do some box breathing, or I can do, longer exhales, shorter inhales, whatever it is. And it was tough. It was tough. I remember getting on the airplane and things started taking off, and I'm like, I don't think I should do this now, It's like, okay. And I'm like literally sweating, but I'm like, you know what? It's worth it. this is worth it because and I have a lifetime ahead of getting on an airplane. So what do I need to do? What tools can I use to support me? And so that was back in August, September. And I've probably taken, I don't know, 20 other flights since then. And it gets easier, you know, the more there's still times, right? Like, you know, you fly in through a storm and stuff like that. It's like, oh God, but go back to the practice. And so, you know, I have a lot of moments where it's like, oh God, because I did this, because I did that, you know, oh, this is what happened. But it always comes down to, as you were saying, the inner work that I've done for myself. It comes out of a place out of love for myself. You know, initially it was so that I could be a better husband or a better father. I could be a better neighbor, all these, and that's beautiful. But for me, at the bare essentials of it, it was because I need to love myself and I need to show that I'm worth it. So the ways that work for me is doing you know, coming back to a meditation practice, you know, integrating journaling, doing the breath work, talking with people when I don't want to talk to people, you know, like sharing with trusted people that can hold space for me, you know, and there's I would almost say, I would venture to say always, before something beautiful is about to happen, it sounds cliche, but it does get really dark. It does kind of seem like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? But this is where the discipline and the consistency and ensuring the alignment of your own values comes into play so that it can drive you to continue to show up even when you don't. And it can evolve you and you can grow through that. So it whatever works for the individual, you know, and it's supporting them and it's loving to them. That's where I would encourage them to just say, hey, if this is the modality that works best, keep going to it. And when it's time for a new one, if there is a time for a new modality, trust that the universe will bring something to you that will show you what that new modality is. But otherwise, you're good, man. You're good.
Yeah, I think being able to relax and stay present and calm in our most challenging situations. I mean, that's the crux of all of Michael Singer's book. I mean, I've listened to some of his talks, and he said, oh, you know, you could listen to all these talks and you could read all these books. He's like, but I can give you spirituality in one word. He's like, just relax. He's like, if you could just, you know, relax when you're in traffic, relax when you're on an airplane and it's stressing you out. Like if you could literally just retrain, and we are animals, right? So it does take time. It takes training. And especially like Dr. Joe says, like, if you've been practicing being stressed out for 40 years, like how long do you think it's going to take you to like rewire that? You know what I mean? So, and I love that too. I think it's a multifaceted thing. It's not a one size fits all. And it's also not getting up from meditation and then being like, okay, that's it. Now I can go back to my default programs and I can go back to being a jerk or impatient or all that kind of, like, really minding yourself as you move throughout your day. And I mean, look, man, you're putting in the work. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind, like all the stuff that you're doing is going to pay off, and you're going to really manifest in probably some wild ways, some really cool, you know, some really cool things. Before we get out of here, tell everybody about this retreat. Where is it? When is it? And how can people get in touch about it?
Yeah, awesome. Yes. So it's the True North Men's Retreat. It's taking place in Sedona, Arizona, from June 4th through June 8th. We've got a website set up. It's True North Retreat 2025, spelled out with the numbers.com. And then you can find me on Instagram, which is a whole other bear that I'm learning how to use, at real Brent McCann. That's MCCANN. Or, you know, I'm really on LinkedIn a lot more than anything else. So you can always look me up there. But yeah, I'm here, man. I'm excited. You know, we've got some great VIP specials going on right now for the early bird as we're getting closer to the event. So yeah, it's going to be awesome. Really great opportunity.
Awesome, man. I can tell your passion for it is real. And you know, whatever happens with the retreat in the next few months, like I'm just excited. I'm excited for your new chapter and your new journey. So thanks a lot for all your wisdom and taking some time to chat, man. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you, John. I appreciate you, brother. I'm glad that you responded to my email 4 months ago.
I never miss one. Some of the, like 90% of them are crazy spam and people try to sell me stuff or whatever. But I always at least respond and say, hey, what do you got, universe? You know, so
That's beautiful.
Thanks, man. Take care of yourself.
All right, you too, man. See ya.